So, no, I wouldn't say I have a passion for HR.
Welcome back to Human Resources for the People. It's a human capital revolution. Today I'm answering Ask HR subreddit questions because I'm banned part. Oh, I think we're at like in the hundreds now with how long this channel has been running. And here is where I give my candid feedback on questions that are asked on the Ask HR subreddit. And it's because I cannot comment on them on the actual subreddit. We got a question about compensation out of New York. We got a question about questions during an interview from Arkansas, and a question about a problem in Iowa and an ADA request. Let's go right over to Iowa and get started. They had a meeting over an accommodation request with HR. It didn't go great. HR started an interrogation about what they were requesting, and they were unintentionally blunt and stern in their responses. At one point, he said they could Google it, and they're asking what they thought the fallout would be. Did they mess up? Are employees often difficult in meetings with HR, or will the meeting stand out? And their mental health has been declining because of a bad work environment. When they started the accommodation process, they made promises about what it would entail and are taking forever to respond to their request. So I don't think the fallout will be great. It depends kind of on the level of responsibility that HR has in the company. In many companies, HR has a mitigated value in terms of recommending any sort of discipline or giving any sort of performance recommendations, right? And some they can have an outsized role with respect to the influence they play with managers. But ultimately, this person's not your manager, so there shouldn't be any outcome. I think if I had to imagine, the HR employee is really struggling with what your accommodation would look like. A mental health accommodation is very difficult, and that should be understood as that trying to accommodate these things often are unquantifiable, they're undefinable, and ultimately HR is put in a bad spot with trying to figure out how that they can accommodate you. And that's probably why it very much looked like a interrogation, because HR was struggling, and that's unprofessional, right? And that should be recognized. But you have to realize that trying to come through with an accommodation in these scenarios, a realistic accommodation in these scenarios, is often untenable, and that's where I think that people struggle, and interpersonally. Ultimately, no, you probably didn't mess up. Probably, employees are often difficult in meetings with HR, so it's unlikely that it'll cause too much of an issue in it, but it does matter as to how much influence HR has in your organization. The next question is out of New York, and it asks, I'm hourly and company wants me to answer emails off the clock. It says I'm not getting paid extra to answer these emails off the clock, and company is not paying them a stipend for the use of the data on their phone, and they keep doing this. So real quick, no. I mean, generally speaking, you should be able to answer, or you should be paid for all answers that are off the clock. Now, if it's de minimis, that becomes a different discussion, right? So if they are one-word answers and not very frequent, I think that's a different discussion altogether than long, drawn-out answers, or effectively expecting to be on call. Um, you know, and I'm curious whether or not if they're frequently doing this and they require long answers, then yes, you should be paid. And notify the HR first, because generally speaking, they are paid to protect the company, and this is one of the ways that they can do it, is to prevent these sort of circumstances. But they can't prevent them if they're not aware of them, and that's why giving HR the courtesy to try to rectify this situation is absolutely a good idea. The next question is, what questions would you like to hear from the interviewee during or after a job interview? And I've got a few. I really like questions specifically because I'm familiar with an industrial environment, specifically questions surrounding safety. You don't want to be kind of accusatory, right? You don't want to say, how safe is this, or something of that nature. But I think that that's a really important discussion just to have, because when from a manager side, when people ask about safety in an industrial setting, they care. And it, frankly, if they're safe, it makes the manager look good. I also like people asking what the career path looks like. Questions like, are there examples of a career path beginning with this position? Or what are common career paths in this department? I think those are really great and opportunities for you to understand what the future holds. Don't ask things like, How much does this job make? You can't ask about benefits. I think that that's a fair question. Uh, Asking specifically about 401k if you're in the room with HR is a reasonable thing. How much does this job make? You should have an idea before you get into like a final interview. I mean, any kind of phone screen, that's the opportunity to ask that question, absolutely, but don't ask it at the end. And beyond that, don't do any that kind of try to close the deal. I think for a while that was a recommended tactic, but it just seems so tacky. Questions like, "So, do I have the job?" or "Is this so? Have I said anything that makes you think that I'm not a good fit?" Those are questions that I don't really know how to say that I dislike them. I just strongly dislike them. What are questions that you think that you should ask in any job interview? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye, guys.